Hello and welcome back to the Game Room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people out there who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least hate the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 1,551 of you beautiful people checking out this video. Now, with Tears of the Kingdom mania going on right now, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at my entire Zelda collection, talk about my memories with all of the games that I've beaten, and a few of the games that I haven't. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
So The Legend of Zelda and I go back, way back. In fact, I can't remember a point in my life where The Legend of Zelda hasn't been a part of it. And the first game I played on the original NES, I honestly can't tell you. It was one of either Zelda 1 or Zelda 2. And these are my original childhood copies. So these are actually my older brother's copies. Now, I want to say I probably played Zelda 2 first, just because we got it in '89, and I was way too young when we got this to really understand. I was born in '86, so this came out in America in '87, but I don't think my brother got it until maybe '88 when we got our NES. But I honestly don't really remember much about this game. I remember far more about Zelda 2. But let's start off with the first NES game. What's funny is that, much like my thoughts on the original Super Mario Bros., I don't have a lot of fondness for the original Zelda. I love the gold cartridge. I love what it stood for. I understand the appeal. I even went back and did a Hated Gems on it a few years ago, and unfortunately, my save file died or erased itself on the last dungeon. And even though it doesn't take too long to go through it, I'm not a huge fan of the game. I put it down, and I still have yet to beat Zelda 1 to this day, which I know is a crime and a travesty, and I hope to rectify it someday. It's just not a game I enjoy. It's one of those things where it's impossible to put myself in. Even when I played it back, that's the thing, is even when I played it back in the day, I didn't like it that much. When I had the choice between 1 and 2, I enjoyed 2 more. And then Link to the Past came out, and it truly was one of those things where, why would I go back and play the first one when Link to the Past does what the first one was trying to do, and so much better? And I just never picked up the first one. Anytime I would try to play it, I would get to the first dungeon, kill the dragon boss, and then be lost and have no idea what to do. It's a little too obtuse and cryptic for its own good. And even though I do have it in the box. I mean, I have all the stuff, the materials, the manual. Maybe using the map and things like that would make me enjoy it more. Unfortunately, Zelda 1 is probably one of my least favorite Zeldas, and one that even though it started everything, I don't care much for. However, the same cannot be said for what is amazing to me. So Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. A lot of people nowadays will try and convince you that this is a game that was not liked when it came out. That could not be further from the truth. I enjoyed Zelda 2 mountains more than Zelda 1. And what I firmly believe is that this is all revisionist history once Zelda 3 came out and reinforced that love of the Zelda 1 style. I think that's what really made people start looking back at Zelda 2 and thinking, what the hell is this? Because this is also back in the NES days, the sequels to games would drastically change the formula. At least with Nintendo, it seemed that way. I mean, you did that with Zelda, you did that with Mario. Now, caveat, Mario was only that way because we got a different game in the States. But not just, Final Fantasy did it that way where they changed the formula. Fire Emblem did it that way. Castlevania did it that way. Contra didn't, but they changed the damn name to Super C, so who knows what the second game even was. And a lot of the other games that didn't change the formula, people didn't know about. We didn't know about Chip 'n Dale 2 or DuckTales 2 or RC Pro-Am 2 because it was the same game. So it was almost a strategy to make it a sequel completely different. Because especially back then, this was when people were like, why would we buy a Super Nintendo? We bought an NES. So you couldn't just give someone a sequel that was giving more of the same. You had to almost reinvent the wheel and make it worth people's money. Except for stuff like Double Dragon 2, but that added 2-player. So that was the big hook. But yes, this is the reason why I feel that Zelda gets lumped in as an RPG, because this is honestly an action RPG. It's a side-scroller where you have experience points, you level up, there are hit values, spells, and magic system, and one of the more in-depth magic systems in any of the Zeldas. It actually matters. The magic system actually matters in this game far more than in any Zelda. I mean, the magic is kind of an afterthought in almost all of them, other than Link to the Past, which uses it to unlock certain areas. You almost never use the damn magic system. Zelda 2 is not my all-time favorite Zelda, but it is my all-time favorite NES game, and probably, if not my third favorite Zelda of all time, it is definitely my second. I love this game so thoroughly. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's the fact that this was the game that when I did get older, I would go back and play again and then get better at it and have this one boxed too. So the reason I have a box and a gold cart is that I actually bought gray cart versions of both Zelda 1 and 2 when I was maybe 8 years old, because my older brother took the gold ones, and so I wanted to have them back in the collection, but I got the damn Gray Cart re-releases because I didn't know there was an option to get them. I think I got them off eBay, if anything, like eBay when it was brand new. And so I put those in the boxes because we had the original boxes, and I keep the gold ones out because I love looking at the gold cartridge. But yes, Zelda 2, phenomenal, super fun game. Don't listen to the haters online. It is not that hard. Don't go to Death Mountain before you go to the second temple. Level up in the swamp. I've talked about this ad nauseum. I've done a Noob Gamer on it. I've done a video on it. Just trust me, Zelda 2 is a phenomenal game. And all of that led to what at the time was going to be Zelda 3, which then was called A Link to the Past. And this is what I claim is my all-time favorite game of all time. I actually picked up a second copy when I reviewed it back in 2015 because all the save files on this are important to me. I didn't want to delete one so I could start fresh, so I bought a greatest hits copy just because I'm like, okay, I'll have the greatest hits variant, and made a new version of this because on this one is my wife's playthrough, my childhood playthrough, and then a playthrough where I just went through and did everything with no deaths, or had 4 deaths or something. Which, it's funny, the counter you have at the end of the game is not regarding deaths, it's regarding the amount of times you turn the game off. It's not even saves, I don't think. It's how many times you turn the game off and started a new session. So even if you don't die at all and you don't leave the system on for the entire playthrough, it's going to show you a counter of 2, 3, or 4. The only way you get no counter is if you play through the whole thing in one sitting and don't die. Takes the original formula of what made this so great, the exploration paired with the almost the time gating of the items that some nowadays would call Metroidvania-like, but at the time this was what was called the action-adventure genre, which is ironically enough a dead genre in my opinion. Nowadays anything that's action-adventure gets lumped into Metroidvania or RPG because everything's trying to be an RPG, but this truly was such a treat to play. And there were things in it that could be obtuse, much like the original Zelda. The pink bomb, unlocking the area to give yourself the silver arrows, and things of that nature, being able to find certain items, or knowing that you had to drain the swamp in order to get into the water temple in World 2, and you don't know that Ganon's the main boss. I mean, at this point it had been pretty well established Ganon was the enemy, but in this one you think it's a guy named Aghanim. Find out once you get through the light world, you kill 3 temples, and then you get into this dark world, which is funny. When you get the mirror and you go into the dark world when you're going to Death Mountain, I didn't think twice of the fact that the whole map is open on this area, and we're in this, and like, no, it just seemed like we were in some alternate universe real quickly. But then once you defeat Aghanim and get transported into the Dark World, and you have this entirely new map with 7 new dungeons, was a magical experience that I can't say how many games give that experience, and it's a thing that's dead nowadays because games are so artificially bloated and long. The only other thing I can attribute to this would be something like Symphony of the Night's Upside Down Castle. Because when you get through a game and you think, or Final Fantasy VII too, Final Fantasy VII, the original Final Fantasy VII, once you get out of Midgar and the whole world opens up. Like, there's these times where you think the game is over, you think you're at the end of the game, especially because you were so used to these games, it could be beaten in 2, 3, 4 hours, and then find out, oh no, there's so much more to it. Is a special thing that we sadly don't get much of nowadays, which I do miss. But Link to the Past, I could go on and on and on about. Phenomenal game. Was technically the first Zelda game I ever beat. So I beat Link to the Past first, and then I beat Zelda 2. And then moving on to the next game, which isn't the one I beat, but is the next one that came out, which is Zelda 4, which always annoyed me because I was not a fan of the Game Boy. Every time I saw the stupid game pop up in Nintendo Power as the best-selling Game Boy game, and that was Link's Awakening. I was intrigued by it, but I was also annoyed by it because in order to get our Super Nintendos, pretty much the only time in my life where we got rid of games and sold them, we sold our entire Game Boy collection to pay for a Super Nintendo because it came out at a time that was not Christmas or birthdays, and my older brother and I wanted one. We wanted to play Mario World, and so I think Dad may have said that he would supplement some of it or wouldn't, but essentially we sold all our Game Boy games and a handful of NES games. That's when I sold Werewolf, the Werewolf, the game I'm wearing right now, and Jaws and a few other things. But I didn't pick up Link's Awakening. I did pick it up in 2000 when I got a Game Boy Advance because they had the colorized version, Link's Awakening DX. And you know what's funny? I didn't enjoy it, which I always knew because it didn't have backlighting. I didn't want to play it on a Game Boy screen. Somehow I made it through Pokemon Blue. I guess the collecting nature of it got me through it. But going through a Zelda game where you have to sometimes stare and figure things out and not being able to have the distance and having to crane my neck, and I didn't like it. So I didn't beat this game until I did it for the channel, I want to say in 2017 or 2016, one of the original Hated Gems. I tried playing it on the Super Game Boy, but I don't think that allowed me to unlock the color dungeon. So I still have yet to try the color dungeon, but I did beat it. It's not perfect. I think it's a little overhyped in my opinion. I'm not a huge fan of the fact that it makes you change out your sword for the different items, but then again the Game Boy has 2 buttons. What are you going to do? And I'm not a huge fan of the fact that when you run into a rock, it constantly will tell you, oh, you gotta put on something. Like, it's constantly giving you hints. But for a Game Boy game, it is very long, it has a lot of stuff to it, and the dungeon design is very interesting. And they even brought back the old Zelda 1 side-scrolling sections, but then you have classic Mario characters popping up randomly, which it's all over the place. This is also the game that started not the downfall of Zelda in my opinion, but the kind of the humor or the sense of humor of it. Stuff like Tingle or the different characters you meet with. Like the original couple of Zeldas, you had normal towns. It was very serious adventure. In this one, you started having the zaniness enter the universe. And I'm not the hugest fan of that. I'll be upfront with that. I prefer the serious nature of Link to the Past and Zelda 2 much more so than when you start getting fetch quests in this too. That didn't really start showing its true volition though until Ocarina of Time. Now, Ocarina of Time, what makes this such a great game is that this, much as Mario 64 translated Mario to the 3D space, this took the Link to the Past formula, the thing where you basically have 2 different parts of the game. You have the young Link, and then you have the adult Link. The young Link, sort of the light world, the adult Link being the dark world. They put their own spin on it and made it so good. They brought back the gold cartridge. This is the first game I ever remember pre-ordering, and the first Zelda game I was hyped for, because Link to the Past just came out. I was 6 when it came out, so I may have been reading about Zelda 3, but it didn't quite hit me the way that I knew Ocarina of Time was coming for a good 2-3 years before it came out, because it was announced early, I want to say. I mean, 95 maybe. Of course everyone knew when it was coming out, but still, phenomenal game, really good. Still to this day, one of my favorite games. This is probably my 4th favorite Zelda game of all time. It really helped establish a lot of the 3D Zelda tropes going forward. For better or worse, you do have an intro section. Now, the intro section in this game is not as bad as the later ones will get. You do have fetch quests like the big sword and things like limiting the amount of rupees you can carry, finding collectibles, because all of the 3D games got that stupid collectible hype that you got from Mario 64. But you still found heart pieces. You still had the items that some of them were optional, didn't really do all that much. Like, I think the ice arrow, you could get away with not finding it or things of that, which I enjoyed that part of Link to the Past as well. And it's just a big sprawling world that always felt like there was something to do in it and was a fun experience. Now, one that was not a fun experience for me was the first direct sequel they've ever done to a Zelda game, other than Zelda 1 and 2, though they said such different styles. This used the same engine, but it had a completely different game design around it, and that was Majora's Mask. So this was the next game I beat. I did beat Majora's Mask. I got it when it was brand new. This is another gold cart variant, but I did not enjoy the time loop. And the reason why I didn't enjoy the time loop is because it made everything I did not permanent. While yes, that could be enjoyable, there also was the fact that I felt like I had to limit myself to my playtime, because if I was on the second day, I couldn't then just decide to go and hit up a temple. No, you were screwed. And even once you beat a temple, which there was only 4, mind you, and at this point we had temples going up and up and up. I mean, the first game had 10, Zelda 2 had about 8. And then of course there was the Death Mountain section, things like that. Link to the Past had an insane amount, like 12, I want to say. Ocarina of Time had 10, and then in Majora's Mask you only had 4. And the game came out a year after Ocarina of Time, and before this we were used to big 4 or 5 year gaps between Zelda, not counting Link's Awakening, like console ones. So I wasn't a fan of the darker mood. You know, I don't know if Ganon wasn't really prevalent in this game. I think he is at the end of it. He is in almost all of these games. But that stupid time loop. And I remember specifically, I beat a temple, and then going back in the temple not being beaten anymore just irked me. Yes, you gotta keep your items and things of that nature and heart pieces, but feeling like my impact on the world was always constantly being reset is not something I enjoyed, and not something I enjoy to this day. And the fact that so many people not only love this game, but put it as one of the best Zelda games of all time, it just makes no sense to me. Especially when everyone hates on Zelda 2 and yet they love Majora's Mask. I can't understand this. As someone who played it while it was current, grew up with it, and talked to people of the time, I don't remember anyone liking this game more than Ocarina of Time. And now I would say you put a poll out online, and it's going to be a 50-50 split, if not more, people liking Majora's Mask. And I don't know if it's just, you know, series fatigue, because by now we've had so many other 3D Zeldas that play like Ocarina of Time and are a lot easier to play because you don't have to worry about playing it on the N64 with the old visuals. But that, in my opinion, is the second piece of major Zelda revisionist history. Zelda 2 is bad, and Majora's Mask is good. And I still don't like Majora's Mask. And if you like it, good for you. Now, we're moving on to the infamous GameCube era. Or GameCube era, but you could call it an era. So I've already talked about it before. They had the Game World thing where they showed the GameCube footage of Link and Ganondorf fighting, but that game didn't come out. Now, I did get a pre-order bonus for this game, and that was the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Master Quest, which is basically just Ocarina of Time on the GameCube, but the Master Quest is kind of an arranged mode, but I really never got into it that much. But the game that did come out, that, you know what's funny? I did enjoy it. I think the more I get past it, it's kind of a mid game. Like, this is not one of the worst Zelda games by far, but it's not one of the best, and that is Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Now, I know a lot of people will hate on the Triforce quest towards the end of the game. I didn't really ever find that bothersome. I enjoyed the exploration aspect, going to the different islands, checking out all the different secrets. My big complaint with Wind Waker is the fact that there is so much cut content that there aren't that many temples in it. And much on the heels of Majora's Mask, it felt like they really were limiting the amount of dungeons. Because I don't know about you guys, but I, in a Zelda game, do not like it when I find items outside of dungeons that are required items. I mean, I kind of give Ocarina of Time a pass for this, but getting the hook shot in the graveyard section irked me, because that's something you got in the water temple. But then you get the long shot in the water temple. I'm like, okay, I'll give you a mulligan for that. But because there's so few dungeons in Wind Waker, which the real sad part is you find out they cut so many of them. Like, there's supposed to be several extra temples or dungeons in Wind Waker. But all in all, the game was decent enough. They really had another one of those stupid intros that takes too damn long, which I just cannot stand, and damn Ocarina of Time for setting that precedent. I want to say, I think Zelda's your sister in this, or something of that nature. But one of the things that Wind Waker gets very right is that it has a nice swerve at the end of the game that I did not see coming. Of course, how could you not see it coming? But the fact that the whole game you don't really think Ganon's gonna be there, and then Ganon is coming there. And then around this time is when they started focusing on the Zelda Timeline, which also is another thing I could care less about. But that's when inklings of, oh, these games are related, and this takes place in this alternate universe, and this dream drop 2460 through whatever. But after Wind Waker, I think around this time, they gave the Zelda franchise to a non-CDI developer. They gave it to Capcom, and Capcom made Zelda Oracle of Ages and Zelda Story Oracle of Seasons. Now, unfortunately, my copy of Oracle of Seasons had writing on it, and stupidly, I messed up the label, but this was actually my childhood copy of Oracle of Ages. Unfortunately, and actually this was before Wind Waker, but unfortunately, like Link's Awakening, I couldn't get into the game on handheld. And unlike Link's Awakening, I haven't gone back and beaten that one. That is another one for the Hated Gems pile. It's a pretty competent Zelda game, and the hooks of these are you have the ability in Oracle of Ages to progress time backwards and forwards, I want to say, and then Oracle of Seasons, you can change the different seasons. So you can go from summer to winter, and then a lake might be frozen over. And from what I know, the Oracle of Seasons was supposed to be more combat heavy, Age is supposed to be more puzzle heavy, and there was supposed to be a third game, and the third game was scrapped, and then they just they cobbled together a little bonus thing where if you beat the game on both, you can connect them, or I think if you beat on Age, you connect to the seasons, or vice versa. And I want to say that unlocks the true enemy, which of course is Ganon. All right, now a nice little series that it's kind of tangentially attached to Zelda, but we got to talk about it. When they made the Link to the Past remake not even remake, this re-release for the GBA, they had a little bonus minigame called Four Swords Adventure, and it was such a success that they decided to make a full-blown game called Four Swords Adventure. Now, I did have the big box version of this because everyone did. It comes with the Link cable. Unfortunately, I threw that out. One of the few things I did. Usually I was pretty good about that. I still never had the pleasure of playing it with 4 people. I talked about this when I mentioned 4-player or 2-player GameCube games. Fun, solid experience. And you know what's funny? Even as a 1-player game, it is still a good time. So Four Swords Adventure is something I would like to see Nintendo go back to, and not in a Triforce Heroes way, because that was a big disaster. All right. And then we talked about Wind Waker. Of course, I got the HD remake of Wind Waker, which I've never played. And the next game, and also I don't know when this came out, the collection, this was something I legitimately missed. I must have been playing World of Warcraft whenever this came out, because I don't remember. Was this a pre-order bonus for Twilight Princess? I'm not sure. But speaking of Twilight Princess, that was the next game to come out, and you had it on the GameCube, where you still use your left hand as Link. But, of course, like most people, I was all hyped for the Wii, and I picked it up for the Wii. Now, what's funny is this is the first game I ever picked up for the Wii. Now, I picked this up at launch, but I did not own a Wii. And you know what's funny? I never bought one. And I played this with my buddy Bryce's we were roommates in college, but I was also playing World of Warcraft, and I just lost interest and stopped playing it. And I never picked it up until years later on my little brother's Wii, and I did eventually beat it, and I just never got into it. It felt like a kind of a day late and $1 short as far as what it was delivering, because it seemed like what we had expected from that Space World demo, but it also relied too much on a gimmick. This is, for some reason, Nintendo in the 2000s really loved their gimmicks, because you put Mario in space, you made Link a dog, you gave Link a bird, you gave Link a boat. Instead of focusing on the solid gameplay practices that you had set up in the 90s, now instead of evolving the series or just making a solid entry in the series, you wanted to push the envelope in a way that Nintendo always does, which is if someone zigs, they gotta zag. And even though it's a competent game, and it really set up the visual style, I feel like, of a lot of Nintendo properties, of giving the evil shadow beasts these neon pinks and purple colors, which you still see, as well as all the iconography showing up everywhere with the hidden eye statue and things of that nature. I just wasn't a fan of it. I just wasn't a fan of it. I did enjoy Midna. You know what's funny is Midna, of all of the assist characters, I think was probably the best one, because she actually had a nice storyline, more so than Navi or the boat. I mean, the boat was okay, but I don't know. Maybe it was the fact that I put it down. I don't know if I was just getting older for the series or I just wasn't enjoying it. But yeah, that was Twilight Princess. And then the camel, or the straw that broke the camel's back, Now, there's another one we'll get to, but the straw that broke the camel's back was the release of Skyward Sword. So I picked this up, and this is actually when I finally beat Twilight Princess, is I picked this up, and I'm like, well, I gotta beat Twilight Princess before I can play Skyward Sword. So I beat Twilight Princess, and then I picked up Skyward, and I started playing Skyward Sword, got to the intro, got to the part where you finally get access to the world map, and I just noped. I'm not enjoying this. I don't want to play this. Let me go back to my Halo Reach and my Call of Duty World at War. And that was it. And I didn't pick this up ever again until the HD remaster came up. And I beat this for a Hated Gems, and I hate to say it, I still don't like it. Still don't like it at all. If you people do, great, but they tried. I remember the first thing I ever read about it saying how it was the first game in the Zelda timeline, and it's going to be a 40-hour Zelda game. Both things that made me go, oh no, oh no. I don't care what the timeline says, and holy God, the 40-hour Zelda game, please don't tell me the game is 40 hours. Give me the game, and if it's 40 hours, great. I mean, we're not to it yet, but that's part of the genius of... Well, actually, let's just jump to it. The next game, which is Breath of the Wild, Breath of the Wild is a 30-hour game. Breath of the Wild is a 50-hour game. Breath of the Wild is a 100-hour game. Breath of the Wild is a 400-hour game. You really only have to play it as long as you're enjoying it. Now, I know a lot of people don't enjoy the weapons breaking. They don't enjoy the exploration aspect with no temples in it. You don't enjoy the fact that you get all your items at the beginning. I get that, and I do agree with that to an extent, but what I love about this game so much is that it truly gives you the opportunity to explore to your heart's content, to go off in a direction, much like I always say with Skyrim. You can just head east and be like, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that, let's check that out. And it is such an enjoyable experience. I have fond memories, and this one is on my top 3 Zelda games. I mean, this goes Link to the Past, Breath of the Wild, and Zelda 2. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. I enjoyed it so much, I picked up the Wii U version too, which I never opened, just because I wasn't sure I would get a Switch. So I want to say, I think I ordered it on both just to be safe. And still to this day, a phenomenal game. But we're not quite to the sequel yet because I skipped a few. So before that, for the game that actually made me finally beat a handheld Zelda game and made me pick up a 3DS, was the announcement of Zelda: Link Between Worlds. Now, I really should give this game more credit. I think it might be because it's stuck on the 3DS. Maybe if they put it out on the Switch and did a remake. But this is the game that really gave a lot of that Breath of the Wild formula, where you can go to any dungeon in any order. You can get all the items at the beginning. If you don't die, you're gravy. But it takes the Link to the Past map and essentially makes a new game using those old haunts, and does it in such a great way that when I played this game, I said, you know what, it is every bit as good as Link to the Past, and I still stand by that. It doesn't have the nostalgia for me, and I still not crazy about the format, and I like the look of Link to the Past more than this, but you can't have higher praise for this, and I probably should give this so much more laudation than I do. It wasn't even on my top 50 games of all time, but it's because Link to the Past and this game are so intrinsically connected that I almost consider it the same game in that regard, and it is such an enjoyable time. The ability, once again, you have a gimmick, because you have to have a gimmick in all these things. The gimmick is you can go and make yourself flat and go into walls and then pop out, but it is handled so well that it is such a treat. And if you want any of these games to get remade or re-released on the Switch, that'd be the one I would say push for that one, because that one is downright phenomenal. All right, and then the other game that we skipped past was a game I covered for the channel, and it's one that's a handheld game that I really enjoyed, and you know what it is, because I skipped it, and that is Minish Cap. And Minish Cap is another game that really captures that essence of A Link to the Past. It's probably the first game that truly is of that caliber. Even though Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons are good, those are made by Capcom. Minish Cap, and yeah, it has a gimmick. You have a cap that makes you go tiny and go up, but it's a good gimmick. Just like Link Between Worlds is a good gimmick. And I played this for my channel when my buddy Josh, who I worked with, actually bought me the game and said, here, cover this for your channel. And I'm glad he did. And it's not my favorite Zelda game. I'd say it's in my top 10, and it's actually a Zelda game where the main villain is not Ganon. And I don't know how I feel about that. But the game is solid and well worth checking out. The hat has a good personality. Not up there with Midna in my opinion, but still a very solid personality and well worth checking out. That and Link Between Worlds, it'd be fun to see those get modern kind of the Link's Awakening treatment, which I haven't even played this yet either. I'll get to it someday. All right. And now we have a couple of curveballs. So for the most part, I've gone in order of how I've played these. But after I got disgusted by Skyward Sword, my neighbor said, you know what, you should try this game that's more like the older games. So I want to say this was around 2014, 2013. It was after I got my PS3, and he let me borrow his copy of 3D Game Heroes. And this is one of the best Zelda clones. It's not a Zelda game I can think of. Better than stuff like Alundra or stuff like Soul Blazer or Final Fantasy Legend. This is truly a game that's trying to be a Zelda game, and it uses what's going to later become the Octopath style of voxels and that ripple effect from force perspective where it gets blurred in the distance. And what makes this game so cool, other than the fact that you can design your own pixel art for it and your own character, is that when you have full health, your swords will cover the entire length of the screen, and it's harder than you think it would be too. It's harder than you think it would be. But the other one we're going to talk about is the only fan hack that I covered for the channel, which is an amazing fan hack, and that is Zelda The Legend of Link. So I covered this, I think, in 2016. It basically takes the NES Zelda and makes it much more like Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, even borrowing some of the sprites from Link's Awakening. And the intro even shows pseudo 3D graphics that make it look like Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time. And it's just a technical marvel. Unfortunately, in order to make this game, they had to destroy actual games back then, and I think one of the ones that's used for the board for this was something like Batman Return of the Joker. So definitely there's a reason why I got off homebrews. As an early kind of hardcore collector, I didn't realize some of that stuff was happening. Nowadays, luckily, they can make their own boards. That is one. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. Check out my video on it. It really... I wish the original Zelda played like that, because it's a hell of a lot better. And then lastly, we come up to Tears of the Kingdom. So I'm actively playing Tears of the Kingdom, and you know what's funny? I have mixed feelings on this. I really enjoy it, but then there's times when I really wish it was more like Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild was such a drastic change to the formula that I feel like Tears of the Kingdom focuses way too much on the shits and giggles aspect, in my opinion, of something like Scribblenauts, where it's like, oh, we have all these different ways of solving it by making all these crazy contraptions, but they removed your Sheikah pad and replace it with the Pura pad, but the Sheikah pad had better things like the bomb, metallic manipulation, and the time stop where you could hit stuff at people. And they replaced it in this game with the ability to go upwards, teleporting, recalling time, and then gluing stuff together. But for the most part, the gluing stuff together is the only thing that matters, and the other things don't do damage for the most part. Whereas the bomb, one of the first things I did in Breath of the Wild was I killed one of the big Hinoxes with nothing but the bombs when I had 3 hearts, and that was thrilling, and I enjoyed it. And I found myself at one point in Tears of the Kingdom already having 0 arrows, which I never had that happen at all. And there's also, because of the fuse ability to do your crafting, you don't find interesting items in the world or interesting weapons. You mainly are getting reagents to then make the interesting weapons, and it doesn't feel as special when you find them. I'm still enjoying it, but it feels like, for me at least, it lost a little bit of the magic. All right. One last thing I want to talk about is the fact that I have this, because yeah, why not? But yeah, that is my Zelda collection. Those are my thoughts on all the Zelda games. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what Zelda games you have. I do not have the Triforce Heroes or the Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks. Oh, and I missed a couple. So the games I didn't talk about, there's also the BS Zelda Stone Tablets, which is a sequel to Link to the Past. I played that and thoroughly liked the hell out of it. This was a game where you can actually play as male or female kid, so you're not playing as actual Link. It was released for the Satellaview and it's a lot of fun. And then there's another game called Parallel Worlds, which is another fan hack that just was too hard. It's kind of like the Mario Maker syndrome, where because someone's excellent at the game, they expect everyone to be that hardcore into it. So if you don't know the thing where you put the Pegasus boots into a wall and then bounce back, you're gonna be screwed. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's too much. The enemies had too much health and I stopped playing it. Those are some other ones I wanted to talk about. But let me know what you guys think of the Zelda series. Let me know what you think about these games. Are you playing Tears of the Kingdom and enjoying it? Or are you kind of getting worn a little thin as well with the amount of Fortnite influence and the lack of actual craftedness compared to Breath of the Wild? That's kind of where I'm at. As a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday. It's been so nice getting a hold of you guys. Take care.